it was unfortunate that we had to be in that situation. You're just Rolodexing all the mistakes that you made or miss-ops to kind of put yourself in that position.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Two things to point out. Number one, I like Matt LaFleur with the reference to the old Rolodex in the intro. I have a Rolodex as a producer, as a guest booker for Bill, but I don't have a physical Rolodex. You need to get back to having the physical Rolodex on the desk. I like Matt LaFleur mentioning that. Also, and maybe you heard this, maybe you didn't, Zach Heilprin in his update coming into the show here mentioned that the Packers this Sunday against the Jags going for the sweep against AFC South opponents. I said, it's mid-October. What do you mean going for the sweep? They haven't played the whole division. Oh, Colts, Titans, Texans, Yeah. They have. Look at that. They played the whole, or they're about to play the entire AFC South in the first 8 games. 4 of them are going to be against AFC South opponents. It's not really that important. It's just interesting. Not everything has to be some earth-shattering fact. Not everything I say on the show has to be some mind-blowing statistic. Sometimes things are it's just funny. Not everything has to be groundbreaking here. It's a 2-hour show. There's going to be comments and things mentioned that aren't that important. It's not that important. It's just interesting. And I appreciate Zach mentioning that or making mention of it in his update. It's not like he built the whole 2-minute update around it, but he mentioned it in passing. Packers will go for the sweep against the AFC South this upcoming weekend. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Hope you're having a good Tuesday evening and your week is coming along nicely. Bucks Film Room. Our friend Brian Sampson is going to join us about 5:30, 5:35. The NBA is back tonight. The Celtics playing. I don't even know who this is. Is it Celtics Lakers tonight? Is it the Celtics versus? Who cares? The one thing that annoys me about the Celtics, well, never mind. Let me edit that sentence. One of a great many things that annoys me about the Celtics is banner 18, the hoist banner 18. I banner 18, banner 18, banner 18. Look, if we want to count titles from the 30s and 40s and 50s, fine. But every time the Packers are mentioned, I want the 13 world championships mentioned then. Like, why? We don't do this as any other team. Celtics banner number 18. It's like, okay, sure. But if we're going to hammer that home, can we hammer home the fact that the Packers have 13? Whatever. So I'll probably watch a little basketball tonight. We will preview with Bucks Film Room, Brian Sampson. Probably not tomorrow night. We're probably not going to do too much previewing of Bucks Sixers, because there's going to be no Chris Middleton, which isn't that surprising considering he had off-season surgery, but also no Paul George and also no Joel Embiid. And Nick Nurse met with the media today, and the Sixers beat, I actually thought, did a pretty good job. They asked him, it's like, so was there a miscommunication? Was there a setback? Why isn't Embiid ready to, what happened? And Nick Nurse is basically like, hey, he's progressing nicely. And the beat's like, from what? Nick, what is he progressing from? He played in the Olympics. It's not like he had off-season surgery. It's not like he's recovering from some debilitating injury from last season. What? So we probably, with Brian coming up in the last half hour of the show, probably won't preview tomorrow night's game too much because a bunch of good players aren't playing, but we'll preview the season as a whole, and we'll preview this Bucks roster and some of the changes that were made in the offseason. It'd be nice to catch up with Brian Sampson, and we can hear how he's doing in his YMCA runs as well. 608-321-1670. I want to continue to take your thoughts on the Packers tonight and any other NFL thoughts you might have. A couple quick thoughts on Monday Night Football last night. I thought for about a quarter, watching what the Buccaneers were doing to the Ravens as they jumped out to a big lead. I was thinking, man, do we need to take the Buccaneers seriously as contenders in the NFC? So right now in the NFC, we're for sure that the Lions are contenders. I think you have to be for sure that the Vikings are until they go on some big losing streak or something. I think you need to consider the Packers contender. I think they're talented enough. I think in a relatively limited NFC right now, the Packers are in that group. Other than that, it's the NFC North and kind of everybody else. And last night I'm thinking, man, do we need to include the Bucs in there? And then the Ravens got it going. And then Mike Evans got hurt. And then Chris Godwin got hurt, which was just a bummer to see at the very end of the game. And then they got that shot of him getting carted off with his trainer. And he basically looked his trainer in the face as they're wheeling off. And you can see him mouthing, back to work. And I'm like, man, that's That's brutal. A really impressive showing from the Ravens. I thought for about a quarter there, it's like, ooh, do we need to take the Bucs serious as contenders? Okay, probably not. The other game, did not watch a lick. If Cardinals Chargers was on a Sunday, it would be the third game at 3:30. I definitely wouldn't have watched it. I'm certainly not going to pay extra to watch it on ESPN Plus just because it's on a Monday night. But I see that last night's Charger game went just like every other Chargers game, where it was close and they had opportunities to win and they didn't win, and it was everybody else's fault other than Justin Herbert. It's like, well, he has no receivers, and has the NFL passed Jim Harbaugh by? And well, I know they have elite tackles now. They're set up at tackle for a decade, but their interior line, it's like, man, I'm not a Justin Herbert hater. I'm not anti-Justin Herbert. But every time I check Twitter, when the Chargers are playing, it's like, can Justin Herbert get some help? It's like, so he has no say over he has no control over this? Like, he can't be Kyler Murray on a Monday night? Like, I don't know. It's a weird thing with Justin Herbert. Maybe we could talk about it at length a different time, maybe when the Chargers are more pertinent to Wisconsin sports fans, which I don't know when that would be, but it's just without fail. Every time the Chargers play, I log on and all the football nerds are like, get him some help. It's like, well, he got Jim Harbaugh for Brandon Staley. There's an upgrade. He got an awesome tackle. He's got Slater and Joe Alt. Like, okay, so he doesn't have amazing wide receivers. How much? I'm told all the time that Justin Herbert is unbelievable, and it just looks the same every single year, no matter the coach, no matter the supporting cast. Whatever. I digress. I didn't yesterday get to talk about Stefon Diggs. I wanted to spend a couple minutes in yesterday's show reacting to the beef between Jair Alexander and Keyshawn Nixon and Stefon Diggs, and we just really didn't get to it last night, and I wanted to take a couple minutes to kind of give my thoughts on what happened on Sunday. Okay. First of all, love that this is a rivalry. Two teams that aren't in the same conference, aren't in the same division. They hardly ever play each other, but those two teams seem to really not like each other. Seemed like there was some real animosity, some real juice. I like that. I think that's a good thing. Let me say that from the jump. It really put a lot of extra energy into the building, into Lambeau on Sunday. At home, I'm like, oh, I could feel it. It was good for the game. Just to recap the day Stefon Diggs had, just so we fully understand what happened on Sunday. During pregame warmups, Stefon Diggs tried to fight and confront the entire Packers bench. It was like 1 versus 30. It's not like him and Jair at midfield were jawing. It's not like Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz and Stefon Diggs were getting some receiving reps in and some Packers came over and there was some Jair. It wasn't that. It was Stefon Diggs by himself confronting and trying to mix it up with the entire Packers bench. Which signals to me, yeah, maybe he got chirped, but also you're wanting to make a scene here. This is something that you are going out of your way to do. You're making this about you. You're making it a scene. It's not you and your teammates. It's you making a scene against an entire team, the entire Packers bench. Okay. So you came to play today. You're not going to take any smack. You're not going to take any crap. He's John. He's fighting. He's real animated, real fired up. All right. The game starts, and over the course of 4 quarters, Stefon Diggs in a game where C.J. Stroud needed somebody to get open. No Nico Collins, needed someone to get open. 5 catches for 23 yards. Did a whole lot of nothing. Was shut out by not by Stefon Diggs, was shut out by Jair Alexander. And did you notice during the game, his demeanor completely changed? Behaved all polite. When he caught the ball, just handed it to the official. When he was defensed, or a pass was defended away from him, never talked any smack. Never was John, never was pushing, never was shoving. He acted like a friggin' seminarian for 4 straight quarters. He acted like you're supposed to act as a child in church. Very docile. Keep your voice down. Be respectful. Keep your energy low. Don't be antsy. That's how he acted for 4 straight quarters. After trying to fight the entire Packers bench, 1 versus 50. He's like, I'm going to make a scene and I'm going to make this about me. And then as soon as the game started, in a game where he was needed, he disappeared. Not just from the stat sheet, but he wasn't talking smack. There was no physical, there was no pushing and shoving. There was nothing. That energy, that vibe completely disappeared right out the window. It didn't disappear for Jair. It didn't disappear for Keyshawn Nixon. Didn't disappear for anyone else on the Packers defense. They kept talking all day. They kept running their mouths. They kept pushing and shoving, playing in between the whistles a little bit. I think as you do in a good rivalry game. I don't think anybody ever took it too far. Not Stefon Diggs, though. No. Quiet as a church mouse. 4 straight quarters. Got shut out. Completely changed up his energy. Then after the game, goes to his locker, and in an interview, the audio wasn't very good, and there's a lot of swears, so I'll read the quote for you. Quote, "I don't give an F if I'm by myself or with a million. I'm never the bigger person. I ain't letting S go," Diggs said post-game. "They picked it up or whatever, but I ain't with the football tough guy S." Brother in Christ, you tried to fight an entire team by yourself. You're not with the tough guy stuff. You tried to Jon Snow the entire Packers bench. What do you mean you're not with the tough guy stuff? Now, at least Tommy Pham backed it up. Tommy Pham would throw punches. Okay, weirdly, I've appreciated Tommy Pham more and more since the incident in Milwaukee with the oorah S, right? Which is actually kind of a funny quote now in retrospect. Yeah, he's kind of a meathead, but at least he walks the walk. Stefon Diggs tries to fight the entire Packers bench, makes it all about him, jawing, jacking, talking smack, being Stefon Diggs, and then the game starts and completely tunes out. It turns as docile as an 11-year-old golden retriever. Energy completely changes up. He's dominated. He does nothing for 4 straight quarters. And as soon as the game is over, what does he do? He goes to his locker and he starts talking smack again. I mean, you can't. I have no interest in having that guy on my team. None. And that takes us into kind of our next point and kind of the conversation I want to have about the Packers today. This Packers team needs to grow up a little bit. They need to level up a little bit. I'm not saying that they've been immature. I'm not saying, oh, they talk too much. They do it. No. It's not that they behave like Stefon Diggs. Although Jair talks some smack, Keyshawn Nixon talks some smack, but they talk smack the whole game and they backed it up with their play, right? I need the Packers to grow up, and I need the Packers to mature, and I need the Packers to become adults or more adultish than they currently are in the way that they play. We need to even out our play a little bit. We need to minimize mistakes a little bit. The Packers need to grow up the same way that you grow up between your first and second big boy job. All right. My first job in college was a waiter. I was awful at it. Now, I always showed up on time. Well, except for the one time I didn't show up. I think I was on the schedule. That eventually got me fired. But I like to think I put my back into it. I just wasn't very good at it, right? A lot of people, the first big boy job you get, you might struggle with the schedule, the idea of commuting every day, being there on time, packing everything you need, right? You're just learning how to be an employee in the workforce full time. And maybe that first job works out, maybe it doesn't. But normally when you go to your second job or your third job, you really kind of figure out what it means to be a worker, working 9 to 5, or maybe you're self-employed, or maybe you work from home, whatever. Is as you go from your first job to your second job, or your first college job to your first full-time job out of college or out of school or out of trade school or even out of high school, whatever it might be, right? There's a little bit of a level of step up. Your consistency, your punctuality, your approach, your ability to communicate with coworkers in a manner that's appropriate and effective, right? All these things. That's the step we need the Packers to take. It's not that they're acting immature. It's not that they're behaving like children. In fact, I think for as young of a team as this is, they're very buttoned up. Look at a team like the Patriots. Jalen Polk is calling out his coach at the podium and posting stuff all over social media. Like, nothing like that. I need the Packers, their body of work, the work that they're turning in every week, the game that they're playing. We need to smooth out the performance a little bit, need to become a little bit more consistent. Because as I said yesterday, and I went back and I found this soundbite because this is kind of where I wanted to start tonight's show. At a certain point, we're kind of reaching that point, 7 games into the season now, 7, 8, 9 games into the season, we start to get a pretty good feel for what teams are and what they aren't. It's not to say that teams in week 8 or week 9 are finished products, but we're starting to get there. We get to a certain point, we no longer can say, well, the Packers are a great team. They just shoot themselves in the foot. Okay, but they're not a great team. They're a talented team. They're an inconsistent team. They're an immature team, right? Now, I think week over week over week for the last month, really since Jordan Love came back against the Vikings and they did some nice things in the second half, I think they've taken a step just about every week. I would have liked that game against the Texans to be a little bit cleaner, Jordan Love to be a little bit cleaner, special teams a little bit cleaner. I would have liked Jaden Reed to catch that ball before halftime. Just little things, missed opportunities, missed ops, as Matt LaFleur said in the intro. And I'll play that for you again maybe when we come back. But I need this team to take a little bit of a step, to grow up a little bit, to mature a little bit, and for their performance to be a little bit more consistent. I want to know what I can expect week to week to week. A little bit more. Certainly, any given Sunday, any team can have a good or a bad day, totally. But if this team is a contender and they can truly compete with the Lions, and I don't even know who else, the NFC is really wide open. If they're going to be a legit Super Bowl contender, a team that can win multiple playoff games in a row, because that's the measuring stick, I need to know a little bit more clearly. I need to have a little bit more of a consistent feel of the product that I'm getting Sunday to Sunday to Sunday. Fewer mistakes, a little bit better execution, right? Not so much up and down from Jordan Love. A couple interceptions here and there, not the end of the world. But they almost lost a really winnable game on Sunday because of missed opportunities and mistakes and shaky execution. And if this is a Super Bowl team, I need to see a little bit more consistency week to week. And honestly, game against the Jacksonville Jaguars this Sunday, a great start. That defense is horrible. So crush them. If this Packers team is a Super Bowl team, crush this Jacksonville Jaguars team. I think of the 2014 Packers. It's the last Packers team, other than maybe 2020, that I really felt like it was a contender. They rocked teams that season. They would smell blood in the water coming into games against the Bears at home. I think they just blasted the Eagles in a game that year too. This is a game with a crowd that I think should probably be pretty friendly down in Jacksonville against a bad defense. This is a game for you to really flex your muscles, to really be buttoned up, and to really play an all-around dominant game. You could take that momentum into the Lions game the next week. But that's my focus this week, and that's what I'd like to talk about, at least for a while tonight, if you have thoughts on it. This Packers team needs to grow up a little bit, needs to take a little bit of a step, right? Their performance, their mood week to week needs to become a little bit more consistent and a little bit more reliable. 608-321-1670. If you have thoughts on this, you can call, text, comment on the live stream as well. Your thoughts, more on the Packers next.
it was unfortunate that we had to be in that situation. Yeah, I think a lot of times when you're just Rolodexing all the mistakes that you made or miss ops to kind of put yourself in that position.
It's a good way to describe it. Happy to have the win. Never complain about a win in the NFL. Should never complain about a win. It's hard to win in this league. Just ask the Jets. Ask the Niners. They're in hell right now. Ask the Chargers. They've been trying to get wins out. How badly do you think a Chargers fan would kill for an ugly win? And man, the Chargers lose every single week. They lose the same way. They'd kill for an ugly win. You kidding me? So I'm not complaining about the result. 5-2 is an awesome place to be. You just beat the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud. But in the big picture, I want to see the Packers even out just a little bit. It's like when a kid gets through puberty. You know what I mean? You just know what to expect every single day. When a kid's going through puberty, one day they could be your best friend, one day they could be a pain in the ass. I hate you, Mom. And the next day the kid's crying like a little baby. It's just week to week. You don't know what you're getting day to day. Moody kid in puberty. And then when that kid comes out the other side, a little more even keeled. Kind of know what to expect day to day. Not as many crazy ups and downs. Now, the Packers are the youngest team in football, and it's only week 8. So the season is very young, okay? I'm not saying that the Packers need to be a finished product at this moment in time. But over the next month, right, I'd really like to start to see this team even out a little bit. I don't want to see this Jekyll and Hyde, brilliant play one possession, awful, stupid, brain dead play the next. I would like to start to graduate. Doesn't mean bad plays are never going to happen. Doesn't mean the Packers are never going to make mistakes. Doesn't mean they're never going to lose to a team that they shouldn't lose to. It's the NFL. That stuff happens all the time. But I'd like to start to get a better feel week to week. Team that's a little bit more adultish. It's kind of got it figured out, right? They're not constantly making dumb mistakes and getting in their own way. 608-321-1670. By the way, if you tried to call during the break, I'd run to the bathroom. So if you called and I didn't pick up, that's why. Plenty of empty phone lines if you want to talk Packers. LaCroix Butler texts in. Says, Packers going to make a move at the deadline? Myles Garrett maybe? ? It's out there. I do love this time of year because, like, baseball trade deadline season never lives up to the expectation. We go hog wild for a month or more going into the MLB trade deadline. This reliever, this outfielder, this starting pitcher, and it feels like all of those moves are potentially in play. The NFL trade deadline, I don't know, maybe a couple players get moved. And it feels like over the last couple of years, more players have started to get traded. And I saw today that the Rams are interested in maybe selling Cooper Kupp and paying off some of his salary to get a better pick, a second-round pick, which makes sense. It's what the Raiders should have done with Devontae Adams, but they're cheap. They didn't want to eat any of that money, so they only got, a third-round pick with some conditions on it? Just a joke. Just not a serious team. The Rams are very intentional. We are trying to compete. We are biding our time and building it up for next year. So maybe, with teams like the Rams, maybe there was a little bit more movement, but, every edge rusher on every bad team is supposedly out there. Myles Garrett. I'd be shocked if the Browns traded that guy. Right? Max Crosby. He's all the Raiders have left. So it's interesting. Look, I think if the Packers, and if you want to do trade deadline talk, we absolutely can. I think if there's one position that might make sense for the Packers, it's corner. Not because they're bad at corner, but I would just like one more guy you can trust. I like Jair and Nixon, but Jair has a penchant for sometimes just, it's Thursday and he's hurt. You know what I mean? And again, if you want to be a team that can win multiple playoff games in a row, you need to be able to play through that. And when we talk about a team that's wanting to contend for the Super Bowl, right? Like we want to think of this Packers team as a contender. We want to see them in our eye as a team that can go on a run and to win a Super Bowl. Okay, I'm very intentional about saying win multiple playoff games in a row. Because if you're talking about winning a Super Bowl, you're going to have to win multiple playoff games in a row. That's really freaking hard to do. Right? You need to get a little lucky. You need to get a little hot. You need to be healthier or experience some positive injury luck. But you know how good you have to be to go back to back to back, at least. That's if you get a bye. You got to win in the division round. You got to win in the conference championship round. You got to win in the Super Bowl round against 3 awesome teams. Probably some of those games on the road, the Super Bowl at the very least at a neutral site. Like that is the highest of high standards for a football team. And that's why I always say that. I always say, we're talking about a team that needs to win multiple playoff games in a row to accomplish their goals. Do you trust a cornerback tandem of Keyshawn Nixon and Jair Alexander and kind of not much else? Like, no, I'd like another body in that room. Justice Mosqueda at Acme Packing Company today put out a story about how Carrington Valentine really hasn't been used at all. And when I first saw the headline, I'm like, well, why would he? Jair's been good and Keyshawn Nixon's been great. But it's actually even more than that. This is the snap breakdown, okay? And I'm just going to read directly from this instead of trying to paraphrase, but go read a story, Acme Packing, Justice Mosqueda. Even in a season when star cornerback Jair Alexander missed action with an injury, Valentine has only been able to record 77 total defensive snaps in 2024. For perspective, Nixon has played 385. Alexander, who's missed 2 full games, has played 281, and the benched Eric Stokes has played 277. The usage of Carrington Valentine has completely just fallen off the map, which is a little odd because I think for most of this offseason, he was thought to be the second best corner or at the worst, the third best corner. And I assume that, and I think can safely assume that. Just look at what Brian Gutekunst did in the draft. He did nothing at corner. He didn't touch it until the 7th round. Kalen King, who's not on the team, right? That if he felt bad about this group of corners, he would have drafted some corners. He would have made a move at corner. Instead, drafted safeties, made a free agency move at safety, addressed offensive line in the 1st round, right? There were just bigger fish to fry in the world of Brian Gutekunst this offseason, which tells me that he and members of the organization feel okay about corner. Maybe Carrington Valentine's no longer part of that. I don't know. A lot of people have talked about Myles Garrett as an interesting trade target. They're not going to pay for that. They can't pay for it with the money available on the cap right now, and I don't think the Browns would ever move him. But a player like Greg Newsome, not a superstar corner, right? Not a top 10 corner in this league in his prime, but another nice rotational option. A move like that, it doesn't even have to be Greg Newsome. A move like that, a solid corner that you can trust, where if Jair gets hurt or if Keyshawn Nixon gets hurt, you're not running a corner out there who's a complete and total fire drill, right? Because again, if we're talking about going on a super run, we're talking about winning multiple playoff games in a row. And I don't know if I trust a tandem of Jair and Keyshawn Nixon with not much behind him to do that. So to your point, LaCroix Butler, thank you for the text. Greg Newsome for the Browns, that might interest me a little bit more, and the price might make a little bit more sense. I would always bet against anything happening. I doubt the Packers will do anything. Most teams probably will do nothing. That's the NFL trade deadline. But it's certainly fun to talk about on sports radio. And we will continue to talk about it on sports radio because it's fun. That's the point here. A couple comments. This is Mums Your Dad. Says, as a row 10 season ticket holder, that energy at the Whiteout was one of the best, if not the best atmosphere in a while. Never sat for a second, and my voice is still gone today. Loved it. Yeah, it looked really great. And I think the Diggs confrontation in the beginning played into that. And the Packers defense was jawing and making plays all game long. Jair's a big part of that. Nixon's a big part of that. They were talking constantly. And for whatever reason, I see comments on Bill's stream and I see the text during Bill's show, and it's a lot of people like, oh, and Jair, as if we're rolling our eyes. He was awesome on Sunday. And he's been awesome this whole season, except for the 2 games where he wasn't out there because he was injured. He's been great. I don't know why the talking, a lot of players talk. Why is it just Jair that we focus on? I don't really get that. Q says, what's your bites at the apple mentality? Bites at the apple doesn't apply to football. If this is an anti-Brewers thing, if you're looking for a fight over this Q, I don't even know what that means. It says, what should the Vikings trading for Stafford do to their chances? I saw a tweet about that today. That seems like fake news. I don't know what they'd have to give up for Stafford. I don't doubt that the Rams would consider it. The Rams have shown that they'll go all in and they'll go all out just like that. But I'd be surprised if they traded Stafford. Maybe the Vikings' chances would improve marginally, but then what if Stafford gets hurt? What if he jacks up his thumb and then he's got a bad back? He's always got something. So maybe it would improve their chances a little bit, but I mean, they're pretty good already. And that report today that you're referencing, I'm assuming, Q, that it just seemed like fake news. 608-321-1670 if you would like to call or text the show. Would love to have you. Twitter at Wisco Grant. We're going to talk some Bucks in hour number 2 with Brian Sampson, Bucks Film Room. Let's talk more about this Packers defense coming up next.
Jeff Hafley just did a great job, Packers defensive coordinator. And I know Packers fans have been begging for this. He was doing a lot of the stuff that we rave about Brian Flores for, right? Crowd in the line of scrimmage. They sacked or created pressure on CJ Stroud, the same exact pressure that they used, or very similar pressure that they used on Sam Darnold a couple weeks ago, where they had the double A gap look, but they also had there was a tight split from the receiver. So the corner is closer to the line of scrimmage and they blitz him off the edge. Texans didn't have an answer for that. CJ Stroud gets popped. They had Kingsley Enagbare, who's a defensive lineman, running free multiple times. That's just like Laramie Tunsil falling asleep, not picking him up. It was bad across the board from a Texans point of view, and incredibly impressive from a defensive point of view for the Packers, because they were creating pressure schematically and just out-dueling Houston. In every single third down, Stroud was under pressure.
A little bit from Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. They're with the 33rd team now. Pro Football Focus. They've been doing podcasts a long time. Just a couple thoughts on the Packers' defensive performance against the Texans, CJ Stroud on Sunday. I'm not going to say that we called it last week, but we had some extended conversations during Thursday's show about, hey, look at how well the safeties are playing. Look at how well Jair and Keyshawn Nixon are grading out. If you look at DVOA and their performances, they've been excellent. Jair's been top 10. Keyshawn Nixon, not quite top 10, but a really solid outside corner opposite Jair. Edgerrin Cooper is graded really well. Carl Brooks and others are graded really well. There's players all over this defense that are performing at a high level. Just hasn't seemed like it's all come together yet, at least against an elite opponent. Didn't come together against the Eagles, who are, if nothing else, a very talented offense. And it certainly didn't come together, at least early, against the Minnesota Vikings, another really talented offense. Now, Houston was without Nico Collins, but still Stefon Diggs, still Tank Dell, still Joe Mixon, still CJ Stroud, a couple good offensive linemen. Like, that's an elite outfit. That's a contending offense right there. And it all came together against that contending offense because of all the things that we talked about last week, corner, safeties, linebackers, certain linemen. But then the pass rush also showed up really for the first time in a big way against a meaningful opponent this year. Now, we were talking before the break about maybe some potential positions or potential players to target around the trade deadline. Most of the time, the NFL trade deadline is a bust. I mean, most of the time, Major League Baseball trade deadline is a bust. Your team never really is going to do the exciting you want them to do, but it's fun to talk about. Or so, like, more, which is fun. I'm not going to complain. Should do anything. Thrown around. Can you get a Rasul Douglas? Acquire the not a number guy. You're one and you're they just love the other guy. Valentine. He has 77 total defensive snaps this year. Jair Alexander's missed 2 games. He's played 281. Eric Stokes has been benched. He's played 277. Carrington Valentine has barely played any defensive snaps. If this team is going to chase a Super Bowl and make a Super Bowl run, again, the mountain that they need to climb, the task that they need to accomplish is winning multiple playoff games in a row. That's really hard. And Jair, occasionally, it's Thursday and he's injured. What happened? Right? You need another guy that you can trust, that you can slide into that spot. That might be the position that makes the most sense. I don't think they need wide receiver. I don't think they need O-line. I don't think they need running back. I don't think they need tight end. I don't think they need defensive linemen. They're deep there. I don't think they need edge rusher. I think they're just a depth out the Green Bay pass rush. Then you want them to pick up a corner. A good pass rush makes defensive backs better, need depth on the D-line. I've been complaining about the pass rush, but not necessarily the personnel. I think they're as deep along the defensive line this year as they've been in a long time. I think they got a lot of bodies up there. And Devontae Wyatt's not even playing right now, whether it's Slayton, Carl Brooks, Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, obviously. But then a player like Jonathan Ford, who they added back onto the roster. We didn't know when he got healthy if they were going to keep him around. They did. He's a massive human being who can be a really useful football player and a nice rotational piece, especially against the run, right? And those are just counting the interior guys. That's not even counting the edge rushers between Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Kingsley Enagbare, and Lucas Van Ness. That's a deep group. Now, could they use one more guy? Sure, but I think the argument is if you're going to improve at pass rusher, you want to add an elite difference maker guy. I don't know if you need another rotational guy. They have lots of rotational guys. I don't know that they have a lot of rotational guys at corner. Could use one or more there. I don't know that they need an elite guy. I think they have 2 outside corners so far this season between Nixon and Jair, who have been very good. A rotational piece, a depth piece, I think they could benefit to add at corner. They could, right? I expect the Packers to do nothing at the trade deadline because that's often how the NFL trade deadline goes. But if they were, I think that's a type of player, that's a type of position that they could benefit from. I've been disappointed, Rye Guy, again to your text, with the performance of the pass rush. I'm not concerned with the personnel. They are deep. Lots of bodies that they can rotate through, that they're going to be able to keep fresh. Now, the elite high-end performance of Rashawn Gary hasn't been there, and not really Kenny Clark, but it's a long season, and I don't expect that to be the case. Now, I don't know the ceiling of Rashawn Gary, but it's higher than what we've seen, and I think the last 2 weeks have been really nice positive steps in the right direction. Also got a text from Jeff, not Mark, in Eau Claire. Says, Grant, it's the one true War on 94 week. I'm expecting a segment a day out of you due to enthusiasm for this rivalry. I do have a lot of enthusiasm for the War on 94, but it's more anti I-94 rivalry sentiment when the Bucks and the Bulls try to force it, and then Marquette and Wisconsin tries to force it. And, oh, who's this? The Brewers and the Cubs. It's like, okay, well, there's a lot of schools, there's a lot of sports teams connected by Interstate 94, and they all want to do this, and it's all going to get sponsored. The one true War on 94 is between UW Stout and UW Eau Claire. I didn't know that game was coming up this week. All right, hell yeah. We had UW Stout talk last week. We had the coach on. We had Coach Berm on. How much stout talk? I can't be the only form of UW Stout football talk here. Maybe I should go on Saturday. Sorry, babe, can't go apple picking. I got to go a couple hours away to watch. Is it Don and Nona or is it Carson Park? Where I can look that up. Don't bother texting that in. 608-321-1670. If you'd like to join the show, if you have thoughts on what the Packers should or shouldn't do at the deadline. I truly think that's the only position that makes sense. Because a lot of times at the trade deadline, you're talking about adding a depth piece, a rental for the rest of the year, just to keep other guys fresh or to have some insurance against injury. And I really think the only position they're lacking depth is corner. I think they're deep everywhere else. They got a lot of offensive linemen I like, a lot of wide receivers. That much is abundantly clear. Got lots of tight ends. Heck, Ben Sims can get in there and throw some blocks and catch some passes. If I was a Ben Sims type tight end, I want to play in Matt LaFleur's offense. Ben Sims can play in this offense, and hopefully Luke Musgrave will be back at some point and can be a threat in the receiving game. Like them at running back. Emmanuel Wilson has shown really nice pop as running back too. Marshawn Lloyd should be coming back at some point. You get anything from him, that's icing on the cake. I think they're deep, they're well-rested, and they can rotate guys at just about every position on the field, except for maybe corner. And it's not that you would rotate guys at corner to keep them fresh like you would along the defensive line, but I want options in case of injury because I don't want to get to an NFC Championship game and all of a sudden Jair can't play and then Nixon can't play or he's got to play somewhere else. And then all of a sudden, who are we starting? Oh, we're starting Kevin King, who's not even healthy. And that's why we lose the game. It would just be lame. It would be a really lame way to lose a baseball game. Sorry. I'm thinking about the postseason. Of course, the Brewers come to mind and their postseason losses. 608-321-1670. Let's take one call and then we'll take our break. Wisco Sports Show. Hello, who's this? Good call. All right, great way to wrap up the segment. 3 minutes. We'll wrap up hour number 1 next. Wisco Sports Show, closing in on the end of hour one. Brian Sampson, possibly better known, also known as Bucks Film Room, going to join us at about 5:30. Talk a little ball, preview the Bucks opener tomorrow night against the Sixers. No Middleton, which is the end of the world. But of course, Paul George is the player that's going to take the Sixers to the next level. It's just, it's all perception. It's all PR in the NBA. Middleton is washed, and he's no better than the 50th or 60th best player in the league. It's not like we just saw him light up the scoreboard on 2 bad ankles in the postseason. But of course, Paul George, who's also never available and has had shaky postseason results, he's the player that's finally going to take the Sixers to the next level. Okay, got it. And again, by the way, that's anti-Sixers sentiment, not pro-Bucks sentiment. I will not carry water for the Bucks online. I think they're better than a lot of people are making them out to be, and they have better chances than a lot of people are leading on to believe. But they've lost in the first round the last 2 years. I'm not carrying water for them on the internet, but I will take shots at the Sixers because, oh yeah, this is the year. Now that Joel Embiid has Paul George. Yes. Okay, now it'll all fall into place. Sure, that'll be the combination that does it, I'm sure. 608-321-1670. Your calls as promised. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Eric on I-90.
Eric, good evening.
Good evening.
We didn't get to
today?
chat last night. I think you may have just maybe missed the mark at the end of the show, or just missed the opportunity. So sorry about that.
Right? You snooze, you lose. You got to get in line. You
Oh,
got
that's
to
true.
get going.
First caller tonight. This is a unique position for you batting leadoff. What's on your mind?
Really? Really? This late? Okay. Well, you can pick up Robert Tonyan if you're looking for some tight end.
Did the Vikings release him or something?
Vikings released him, yep.
Interesting.
Pretty good indicator that I think TJ Hawkinson's coming back.
Is he back tomorrow night, Thursday, or 2 nights from now? They're playing the Rams, right?
I picked him up and I have him sitting on injured reserve for all this time because I'm an owner of this team that's fantasy team.
Your fantasy. It's fun to be an owner, isn't it?
It is. It's fun to be an owner. So got that going for us. The Bucks film room.
Mm-hmm.
Is he really sitting in a room full of film, or is it
something like that?
It's digital, right? Is film just nostalgic?
Don't we miss that reel-to-reel tape in a dark room? That's how sports films should be watched. I agree.
That's how this guy should be doing it, anyway. So,
I'd agree.
Well, I think that I'm pretty disappointed with my Vikings having that loss, but it looks like our regression to the mean is going slower than expected. We actually made this a game. So
look, if that's your first loss, Eric, I mean, that game could have gone either way. That was a coin flip game. And that might be the best team in the NFC right there, the Lions. So like I saw a Vikings fan at the bar on Sunday, and he had a nice Aaron Jones jersey on. I said, "Hey man, nice jersey." And he said, "Oh, they suck today." And I'm like, "Hey man, like they're 5-1. That was an awesome game." He's like, "Oh, you're right." He's like, "Jesus, why do I gotta talk Vikings fans off the ledge? That was a great game. Easily could have won it."
Yes. You're not really talking me off the ledge. I'm pretty happy with the way things are going.
Yeah.
I think what you got to battle now is this notion here, or this, the kind of the word on the street here is this quarterback for Detroit's like the best quarterback in the league right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can stand for that. Can you? Can you stand for that as a Jordan Love fan, that they're talking about this guy being the best?
I don't care. I don't care. I don't care where the Packers are on power rankings. I don't care where Jordan Love is in the NBA. I don't care.
I think you care.
I don't
care. I think you a little bit.
I'm telling you, I don't.
I think it's disturbing to you, and you're not admitting it.
I think Jared Goff right now. So the Lions are the best team in the NFC. Is Jared Goff the MVP today, or is it Lamar Jackson?
I don't. I rarely listen to these people anyways. The best way to handle them is not listen to them, right? Aaron Rodgers was right on that. The other game the other night, I thought it was funny. One guy said that Aaron Rodgers' weirdness is going to lose to Russell Wilson's weirdness. It's the battle of weirdness at quarterback. But I want to know what you have. I want to know your problem with the Steelers fans. You don't like them.
Well, okay. Well, we could talk about that for a minute. Well, I have problems with most fan bases. Eric, that's a good call. I appreciate it. Nice to chat with you. I missed you yesterday. So the Steelers historically, or at least the last couple of years, have annoyed me because they win games in such a boring ass way, and it's ugly football, and it's like, oh, the Steelers won 13-11, and Steelers fans, they'd always be on the internet. Talk about us. Why do you never talk about the Steelers? They're 4-2. It's because no one believes that you're any good. And no one believes that you're capable of doing anything in the playoffs. But over the last couple of weeks, I've gained a little bit of an appreciation for Tomlin and just an appreciation for that outfit. And I think as I get older, I appreciate more and more the teams that never bottom out, the teams that are competitive by hook or by crook every year, the teams that are always difficult to beat on Sundays, the teams that are always expecting to be contending for their division, the teams that are always expecting to be making a push for the postseason. And the Steelers are one of those teams. So I don't think they're a serious contender for the Super Bowl this year because I don't think Justin Fields or this version of Russell Wilson is good enough. But the fact that they're just, I mean, they start every year under the assumption that we're going to compete. And I really respect that. To your point about fans, like, and how, well, Jordan Love's not getting the love and the Packers aren't getting the love. I don't care. I don't care. I think fan bases need to take less joy. We need to get less of our value from what the national talking heads are saying. Like, who cares? It's like the first thing, the Packers could win a crazy fun game, and they did on Sunday, right? The Packers could win a crazy fun game, and half of this fan base would immediately go to ESPN.com and be like, "Oh, there's not even a story about the Packers up there. Why does no one talk about the Packers?" Man, they just won. Be happy. Talk to other Packer fans. Listen to local radio. It's the same thing with PFF grades. Piano Man Howe called in and mentioned that Evan Williams' coverage grade wasn't very good on Sunday. I don't know. I don't care. Like, I'm curious as to why that is. I'm curious as to the data that goes into that and the judgments that they make and how those grades come to be. Because we get a better understanding of football, and I want to have the most holistic understanding of him as a player and the performance that he had. I want to be able to wrap my arms around that and my mind around that as much as I can. I don't care. I don't care. Power rankings are such a sham. Speaking of shams, let's take a break here. And after 5:00, when we come back, I'm going to pull up the NFC standings and I'm going to try to power rank the NFC just on the fly. Because after Detroit, I genuinely have no idea. I have no idea. Before the year, we did my Super Bowl bubble, and I think it was Packers, Lions, Niners, and that was it. You remember this? I had a really small Super Bowl bubble before the year started. And I think that bubble's only gotten smaller. It depends on how much you believe in the Commanders. Depends on if you still hold any stock in the Philadelphia Eagles' ability to play well. Their talent on offense isn't really my question. I more have questions about their quarterback and the offense that they run, and their defense just isn't very good. But we saw them against the Giants and Daniel Jones on Sunday, so I don't know how we're supposed to accurately, kind of figure that unit out. But their defense, their personnel's not been good, especially on the back end. This is such a tiny Super Bowl bubble in the NFC currently. When we come back, let's try to power rank the NFC. Let's try to do the top 5 teams in the NFC. If you were to have to place bets or pick teams in the NFC to represent the conference, to go to a Super Bowl, what order would you go? I know I'm starting with Detroit. After that, it's like, do I really think that's the next? Do I really think they're next? It's a fascinating conference. Let's do that. We'll take a 2-minute break. We'll get an update from Zach Heilprin. No commercials. Come back, and I want to do our very best to power rank the NFC. I don't think there are a lot of contenders, and the field gets shallow. The pool gets shallow really quick. So we'll do that coming up next. Hour 2 of the Wisco Sports Show, some NFC power rankings, and a little Bucks preview. Bucks filmer Brian Sampson. That's all coming up next.
underwriters, local claims adjusters.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the NBA season getting underway tonight with a pair of games. The Bucks going to have to wait another 24 hours as they face Philly tomorrow. They will do so without Chris Middleton, still coming back off of offseason surgery. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
It was unfortunate that we had to be in that situation. You're just Rolodexing all the mistakes that you made or miss-ops to kind of put yourself in that position.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Welcome back. Hour number 2. Bucks Film Room going to join us in about a half hour. Q, you got to take a pill on the live stream, man. I don't know what tree you're barking up. You're saying, why do we hold the Packers and the Brewers to a different standard? I'm not convinced that we do. I think this Packers team is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I think the Brewers are more of a fringe contender, but no one was okay. Q, you're saying, Q, this is what I don't get. I'll throw your comment on the live stream and then I'm moving on. This is what your comment says. Not looking for a fight, just wondering how we can have crazy expectations for the Packers, but Brewers just getting into the playoffs is good enough. Packers are just as good as the young crew. Packers are better than the young crew. Who is just okay with them getting into the playoffs and losing? You watched that game a couple Thursdays ago. I know you're on Twitter. I know you listen to these shows. What gives you the impression that anyone was okay with that? You're making stuff up, man, respectfully. And now you're giving me Doc Rivers plus 3,000 for Coach of the Year. Look, I think he could do a great job this year. I think the odds of him winning Coach of the Year are just about negligible. But thank you for listening. Thank you for commenting, Q. Again, your Brewers takes, I think, continue to remain really misguided. But that's okay. All are welcome. Couple of texts here before I'm just on the fly. I want to try to power rank the NFC. I think this is going to be a really difficult exercise. I tried to do it in the shower last night, but I didn't have a list of teams in front of me. Ben and Madison said getting Newsom from the Browns is the only trade rumor that could potentially happen. It feels real, and it feels like it would make sense. I would like a third trustworthy guy with Nixon and Jair. Jair gets hurt a lot, and Nixon's been good, but I would like another option. And I got someone on Twitter and going back and forth with Vagabond John, who's now entered the fray, saying, well, what's wrong with Stokes? What's wrong with Ballantyne? You want either one of those guys covering Justin Jefferson in a playoff game? You want one of those guys covering Amon-Ra St. Brown in a playoff game? I don't. You don't need to get a superstar corner. But again, if there's a position on this team where you could use just another rotational player, I think it's corner. Rick from Spencer says, I bring Z back just so the Lions don't get him. Yeah, I don't think Zadarius Smith is welcome back for a second tour on any team. He seems to wear out his welcome rather quickly. Duck and Holman. Grant cares. I'm not sure what that is in reference to, but thank you, Duck, for participating always. This text says Detroit, Green Bay, San Francisco, Philly, Minnesota, Seattle, Dallas. Now let's look at the standings real quick. The NFC standings currently, Detroit, Minnesota, Washington, Green Bay, Chicago, Philly. That's 1 through 8. I think Detroit's number 1. Guys, I think at this point you have to put Minnesota 2. I would then put Green Bay 3. I think the 3 best teams in the NFC are Detroit, Minnesota, Green Bay. And if you want to futz with the order a little bit, you can. But I think you have to put Detroit 1, just beat Minnesota head-to-head. And I think you have to put Minnesota 2, just beat Green Bay head-to-head. I think Green Bay could match up well against Minnesota, and I think it would be a competitive game. I think Jordan Love coming back off of injury made that game a little weird. Both teams played really well in different spurts in that game. That game was a little bit closer than the final score. It was an odd game. It was a weird game. But I'm a simple man. I think head-to-head games matter. So Detroit, Minnesota, Green Bay, 1, 2, 3. After that, I mean, throw a dart at a dartboard. San Francisco's 3 and 4, and half of their team is in shambles. But if they get as healthy as possible, they could easily beat Washington. Could easily be better than Chicago. It's not a high bar to clear. So I said yesterday during Bill's show, the NFC's wide open, and Tony from Texas got up my butt on Twitter. I'm like, Tony, there's 3 contenders in the NFC right now, the way I see it. One is the Lions and one is the Vikings. How is that anything but wide open? I don't get how that take met pushback, and Tony might be on hold. So if he is, maybe we'll address that with him personally here in a minute or two. The fourth best team at this moment in time, man, you know who I would say? I would say Tampa Bay, but they just lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin last night. I want to say Dallas, but the body language is terrible. Aikman's calling out the coach and the owner, and then the owner's calling out the coach. Like, that thing's a mess. Philly has some talent, but I think the vibes in that building stink. I think the head coach and the quarterback like each other. They can hand the ball to Saquon, and they can throw the ball deep to A.J. Brown. They're kind of bad at everything else. Honestly, if the Rams could just get a little healthier, I might buy more into the Rams than just about any other team in the NFC not named Detroit, Minnesota, Green Bay. And Washington might be for real. We'll see. Give it another month. I'm just a little bit more hesitant with a rookie quarterback and a new collection of talent, a new coaching staff. It's just going to take me a little bit longer to buy into the Commanders. I have proof of concept of Detroit. I have proof of concept of Minnesota with this coach, not with this quarterback, but with this coach and this roster. And I have proof of concept with Green Bay. They went on a playoff run last year. I don't quite have proof of concept with Washington yet, but come back to you in a month. I could easily be convinced they're a top 5 team in the NFC. I don't think they are right now, but if they're not, I don't know who is. This conference is wide open. It's as wide open gets. 608-321-1670. Let's take a couple calls. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, it's Uncle Packer.
Hey, Uncle Packer. What's going on?
Oh, I'm just sitting here happy thinking about how great the Packers are. And I wanted to agree with you 100%. I think that the NFC North is the top in the league right now. And thinking of the AFC besides the Ravens, I don't think there's anybody we can't beat in the AFC.
Oh, yeah. There's never, in the NFL, there's never anybody that another contender can't beat. I don't think anybody, nobody's ever unbeatable in the NFL, ever. Maybe in the NBA. Like, I think Kevin Durant, that version of the Warriors, that was pretty unbeatable. Some of those Cavs teams were pretty good,
Right.
specifically in 18. But in the NFL, like, if you're good enough to make the playoffs and you're good enough to make a conference championship, you're good enough to beat anybody. Yeah.
I just don't think Lamar's good in the big game, and I'm not too worried about them.
Well, he's not. He's not. And by the way, don't feel bad about saying that, Uncle Packer. He's had his worst game of the year every year in the playoffs and been eliminated. That's just who he's been.
But I forgot to say something yesterday, and I was so proud of the Packers that pushed that guy back from doing the Lambeau leap. And I know now it's been all over the news. Did he get ejected and did he not? But that's so cool. Nobody should do the Lambeau leap at Lambeau unless it's a Packer. And I like them pushing that back. You know what I mean? I thought that was awesome. I'd like to buy that. If he does get kicked out, I don't think he does. I'd buy him another ticket. I mean, that's great.
Somebody got thrown out, and a bunch of people at Lambeau said it was someone from farther back who threw a drink. I thought that it was debunked that was the fan that got thrown out. But I'm with you. Like, what? That's his seat. That's
cool.
That's his personal space. He's paid for that space. He has a right to defend it if he wants.
That's awesome. I'm happy. I'd like to think I'd do the same thing. You might be a little starstruck at the minute, because that is Mixon. He's been around. He was playing a hell of a game. But that's what we got to do. That's Lambeau. You don't do that unless you're wearing a Packers green.
I would 100% agree. Sorry, it sounded like you were going to say something else, Uncle Packer. So I just wanted to make sure you had all the time. I'm with you on all of that. I liked the juice at Lambeau. It was kind of tough to tell on the TV. I think most Packers fans agree that if everything would have, come together perfectly, that would have been a primetime game, and the white jerseys would have been under the lights, and it would have felt a little bit bigger. But from everything that I've heard from people who were at that game, the crowd was great. It was electric. There wasn't any letdown for the matchup or for the jerseys or for anything. It's not the biggest deal in the world that the jerseys, winter warning, it's 70 degrees. Well, what do you want? What do you want? You want Green Bay? You want the Packers to control the weather? There's only select groups supposedly who can do that. I don't think Mark Murphy's one. I won't go any farther. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
What a fun little mid-season exercise we have going on here.
Yeah.
Little power ranking. You focused on the NFC. I just want to shout out the AFC for being so clean and organized.
It is.
There are 4 contenders, and they are all currently leading their divisions. When you look at the Bills, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Texans, obviously the Packers just beat up on a very injured Texan squad, which, got to play who you play. But I don't think there's really another contender outside of those 4 in the AFC.
Hey,
I'm curious, turn the page. What do you think?
Well, by the way, you're right. That's a good point about the AFC, and it's Mahomes, Stroud, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. Like, that's clean. That makes sense. And then some of the wild card teams, they feel like wild card teams. It's like Steelers, great roster, well coached. Indy, really good coach. A franchise that's found a way to sneak in the past, right? Denver with Sean Payton. The wild card teams feel like wild card teams. and the division leaders with their elite quarterbacks. It's all nice and neat and clean. Texans fans, I want to circle back to the fact that you mentioned that the Texans are really banged up, okay? Because I've seen even Texans players point this out on Twitter, and I've seen a lot of Texans fans. They're taking issue with this loss. Whoa, we were so banged up. Well, they were really banged up at linebacker. Yeah. Aziz El-Shair and what was it? Lo'olou, the other one, a Hawaiian-sounding name. Sorry that I don't have it. Yeah, I hear you typing. Look it up, please. Is that why the Texans lost that game? The Texans' defense was great. The Texans' defense got stop after stop after stop after stop in the second half. The Texans' offense didn't pull their weight. Okay, if you want to say, well, if they would have had Nico Collins, it would have been different. Okay, but C.J. Stroud, it's not like C.J. Stroud threw for 210 yards and was just missing his favorite target in the red zone. He was basically he was a non-factor. He couldn't play football. So if Nico Collins is that good and you think that would have made the difference, fine. But the way that this game's being framed by some Texans parties, I don't think it's fair, Vagabond John. That's all. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think, they're missing Robert Woods, which I'm just looking at the injury report here. I don't think he's been a significant factor at all this year, so I'm just going to ignore that.
Or last year.
I mean, look, if we're doing what ifs, right? If the Texans just catch a wide open touchdown pass, we're talking about a Packers loss. So it's also like,
yeah, and if the Packers catch a punt,
were very bad.
We can always do this. The Texans played really bad. It's not like the Texans played incredible and were just a couple horses short. They didn't play good.
Correct. And I think a part of that is a banged up offensive line. A part of that is the injuries, but also the Packers had opportunities that they missed too. I don't want that to be the story. I think the Packers probably win even if the Texans are healthy. I just think for folks who are kind of writing off CJ Stroud, there's a lot of Packer podcasters, we'll say, that are really wanting to jump down CJ Stroud's neck right now. And I'm like, it's one game. He's still a young player. Jordan Love is probably going to have a bad game here between now and the end of the season. But getting back into the NFC, the two teams that, I think we might be writing off a little bit too early. I think we're writing off the Seahawks a little bit, even though you look at their record, you look at who they played, not super impressive.
I like that.
I think we're writing off the Eagles maybe a little too early. And then the other bird team, it's really three, the Falcons, because the Falcons have put together a couple nice games. They lost a really competitive game against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and they lost to the Seahawks. So the birds in the NFC are the wild card crowd, and I think that's a little bit of fun. So you have organized AFC, you have really just a couple of contenders in the NFC North, and then the birds in the NFC.
Do you think the Commanders are legit, or do you think in a month or two we'll be left saying, well, the Commanders have a lot of promise and they were hot early, but other teams got a little bit of a read on them and it's not quite their time yet? Because I feel like that could also end up, I feel like we could also end up in that spot.
Only because if the Commanders do well, I'm likely to win the Zone Fantasy Football League. So only for that reason do I hope Jaden Daniels gets back out there and keeps kicking butt as a rookie. He's a heck of a lot of fun to watch. Very funny that the Bears did not pick him. But yeah,
I think Caleb's, I don't know. Vagabond John, appreciate it. I don't know. I think Caleb's pretty great too. I don't know. Plus, also, Jaden Daniels, the way that he plays, he's like one big hit from breaking in half all the time. Like, the dude is just so reckless. And he's thin. He's slight. But he's great, and he's been fun to watch. And I really hope he's healthy this weekend because I want to see Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels go head-to-head. Like, that's fun. I want that. The NFL and the NFL's fans should get it. G-Dub says, Grant, the narrative of Love and Favre because he's throwing interceptions isn't a good one. Just wait until those interceptions start causing L's. Packers Nation will flatline. I mean, he threw a couple picks against Philly, threw a couple picks against Minnesota. They lost all that games. I'd say that his interceptions have already hurt them. Favre is talked about now like he was Jay Cutler or Jameis Winston. Brett Favre won 3 MVPs in a row. Can we stop using Favre as a punchline? Oh, there's Brett Favre. Brett Favre is one of the 5 to 10 greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. Like the Packers fans, God. And this is like, I used this comp a couple weeks ago. We only know, those are our only 2 reference points. Those are our only 2 reference points for our quarterbacks. It's like, well, who will he be? Will he be Rodgers or will he be Favre? There's certainly no other outcome. It's like the 50s. If you ever watch Mad Men, like Madman. If you've ever watched Mad Men, like every woman, you're either a Jacqueline or you're a Jackie or you're a Marilyn. It's like, okay, so the 2 most beautiful and iconic women of the decade. There's no other. It has to be one of those 2. I don't know. I just think the Favre, and maybe Matt LaFleur kind of was hinting at this at the end of his presser the other day because I don't think he likes the comparisons. Brett Favre is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play. whatever. I'll just let it be. It's fine. Let's take a break, couple minutes. I want to continue to talk about the rest of the NFC. I think it's a fascinating conference. Maybe let's explore some possibilities. Like, I'll try to sell you on the Washington Commanders. I'll try to sell you on the Eagles, sell you on the Seahawks, sell you on the Falcons. I could be sold on any of those teams. I just need more data with those teams. At this moment in time, I don't think I need more data about the Lions, the Vikings, or the Packers. Those three teams, I kind of know what they are. Those are legit contenders. A couple of other teams have their opportunities, have their chances over the next couple of weeks and months to play themselves into contention. I'll tell you the things that I need to see from those teams to really buy in and believe it coming up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. Trying to pick our way through the NFC. Can we build a group of contenders? Can we build a Super Bowl bubble? I remember doing my Super Bowl bubble before the year started, and it was all of like 4 teams. I think my Super Bowl bubble before the year was Packers, Lions, Cowboys, probably Rams and Niners. That was it. I don't think I had an NFC East team other than the Cowboys. I don't think I had an NFC South team. Maybe I didn't even have the Cowboys. I've been more of a believer in the Cowboys than most of the last couple of years just because their offense is so freaking good. Like, one of these years, they got to break through, right? And it just hasn't happened. But I didn't have a team from the South. I don't think I had a team from the East other than the Cowboys. It was NFC North and the NFC West. Now, everyone on the Niners is hurt. And a lot of players on the Rams are hurt too. I do wonder. So the Rams are getting Puka Nacua back. They designated him to return. Cooper Kupp is practicing and healthy, but now the Rams are announcing that they're interested in trading him. I don't know. Darnell the Chump commented on the live stream earlier that it would be silly for the Rams to sell. They're 2-4. But if they get their guys healthy, they started bad last year. Didn't they get off to a 3-6 start last year because of injuries and then they turned it on? I don't know. I don't know that I'd punt this season yet if I'm the Rams. In fact, if I ran a team, I don't know if I'd ever punt a season. I just like teams that hang in there and fight and scratch and claw and try to win every game. Because I don't know that the difference between the 12th pick and the 7th pick is that, like, I want to preserve that culture of winning and competition. And I don't doubt McVay can kind of coach through anything. I think he's proven that even if they were to take a little bit of a step back in a reset year, I think McVay would be fine with it. And I don't think he'd lose his locker room or anything like that. Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota. I think I believe in all three of those teams as legit contenders. And G-Dub's commenting on the live stream, need to see more from Minnesota. All right, like, okay, if you want to make the argument that the Vikings could fall off, fine. But if you want to make the argument that the Vikings could fall off, I think you also need to be open to the argument that the Packers are a little fast and loose and not quite ready. Okay? I think that argument exists too. I think most people are giving the Vikings 10% benefit of the doubt and including them as a contender, and I think it's a similar 10% that's being extended to the Packers, so I'll take it. Let's just say all three of those teams are in there. I need to see another month. And G-Dub, who's a Commanders fan, said, if I'm being honest, Commanders is another prove-it game, went toe-to-toe with Baltimore. Philly game will say a bunch. If the Commanders blast Philly and the vibes look better and they look better organized and they look like, that'll be a big indicator, not only for the Commanders, that they're ready to maybe play on a bigger stage and ready to make some noise, but that'll also tell me, yeah, this Eagles team doesn't have it. Because the Eagles barely beat the Browns, and then they beat the Giants this last week, but the Giants are awful, and they can't score. And the Eagles against the Giants rode the same basic formula to success. It's the only formula that they have. Let Saquon run the heck out of the ball and let Jalen Hurts throw go balls to A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown's really good at go balls, and Saquon Barkley's really good. But if a good team can take away even one of those two things, Jalen Hurts can't sit back there and dice you up in the pocket. He's just not capable. He's not that guy. And the head coach and the quarterback and the offensive coordinator and the vibes, all of it sucks. You could convince me that Seattle would be a nasty contending team that could get hot. Because I think defensively, their head coach, Mike Macdonald, is a defensive guy. And their defense has had bad lapses. But it looks like their defense really started to take a step in the right direction against Atlanta this weekend. Okay, well, if the defense gets it together, they're 4-3. Their vibes are better than the Rams, the Niners, and the Cardinals. But the Cardinals are the Cardinals. Like, Seattle could just win the West. And I always kind of trust Seattle as a brand and as a franchise. So I could see it happening for Seattle. And DK Metcalf, Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, they got legit weapons and a really solid running game. They're always going to run the ball well. Their defense should come of age this year with Mike Macdonald. They just have good talent. So I could buy into Seattle. I don't think I can buy into Philly. I can't concoct a scenario in my head of, well, if this and that and this, I can't see it. I think their quarterback's too limited. Vibes are too bad. I don't trust their coaching. I think I'm just out on Philly, despite all the talent that they have, especially on offense. Atlanta's interesting. They're also quarterbacked by Kirk Cousins. And that's difficult for me, especially coming off an Achilles injury. Maybe Seattle is really the only other team that I buy as a possible contender. Detroit, Minnesota, Washington, maybe. Seattle, maybe. Chicago, maybe. We'll see. I'm interested to see what Caleb Williams looks like in a month. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, it's Darnell.
Hey, Darnell. Speak of the devil. I liked your comment about the Rams. I don't think the Rams should sell either. I think there's a path for them still.
They're always a scary team. With Stafford at the helm, he finds a way to make his teams relevant. He did it in Detroit with, what seemed like a box of scraps a lot after Calvin Johnson was done. But I don't know. I just think that the Rams definitely have something there that they're not really performing to the level that they can this year. So I don't think that they should be getting rid of their pieces right now, especially not their quarterback.
No, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, maybe they have plans to draft a quarterback this offseason, but that doesn't mean that you trade Matthew Stafford now.
No, I don't think it's really a trade high scenario either.
No.
So, Yeah, actually, the reason I was calling is I was talking with my dad last night about the Packers, and he had mentioned that this year felt like super similar. The first 6-7 games felt super similar to last year, and I was like, "What are you talking about? They're 5-2. You know, a lot of people view them as one of the better teams in the NFC. Like, what's the idea there?" He's like, "They're playing the same kind of games. They're just winning them this time." And I hadn't thought about it like that because they are playing, you know, a little bit loose with it. You know, they're making some mistakes, but the mistakes aren't costing them victories the way they did last year. And I think that's a pretty decent take.
I just think the scale is different, right? Like they started off and they shot themselves in the foot a lot last year, but they also weren't, moving the ball for 400 yards. You know what I mean? Like this year, yeah, they're doing some of the dumb things, but the huge plays are there. Like they're just cooking on offense, even through some of those struggles. So if you want to draw some similarities, yeah, I don't think those similarities are maybe as direct as you just made them seem, but that's fine. I'm willing to hear this out. I like this take.
Well, it's I guess it's more of like that Houston game is one that the first half Packers last year lose 9 times out of 10.
Sure.
Right. And they overcame just a mountain of mistakes, especially on offense, right? The defense played out of their mind, and that's something that's also different from last year. I mean, the defense gave them chances to win, but they weren't taking the ball away.
Sure.
Actually, I think Vagabond John called yesterday, and he was talking about they're exactly the same through 7 games as they were last year, 20.9, right?
Yeah, points per game, yeah.
And yeah, that's great and everything. And I'm glad they're the exact same as last year. But this year, they're at the top of the league in turnovers. Last year, they were at the very bottom of the league in turnovers. So, I think that's kind of comparing apples to oranges when it comes to the ferocity and taking the ball away and that kind of thing from a defensive standpoint. Where this year they're leaps and bounds ahead of where they were last year. So, yeah, it's been really exciting to see. But I gotta say that was a frustrating ass game to watch on Sunday.
Yeah, it was. Well, especially towards the end, because you kind of felt it trending the wrong way. It's like, man, the Packers defense is going to give up the drive at the worst time, and a game where the defense played so well and the offense did so many good things. Maybe the Packers lose that game to the Texans last year, to your point, Darnell, at this time. But they lose that game last year because they're not getting 4 or 5 unbelievable throws from Jordan Love. Right? The 2 touchdowns were amazing balls. That throw to Reed before half, even though he dropped it, right? He threw that ball outside to Dobbs on the final drive that Stingley made a great plan, but that was an unbelievable play. Like, yeah, they lose that game at this time last year. The scale is different. The scope is different. I understand what you're saying, is that the Packers are not playing on the same, hot, torrid pace right now that they were at the end of last year. And I think that's fine. Because I want the Packers to get hot at the right time. That doesn't mean they need to play bad now so they can play good later. Those two things are disconnected. But I think you're right. There's been some hiccups to start the year. It hasn't been as clean. It's been a little herky-jerky, which is what I said at the beginning of the show. It's time to start smoothing some of those things out. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant. Hey, it's Tony from Texas. The NBA starts today, and nobody cares besides maybe Q and Hot Take Jake.
Well, who plays tonight? Who do the Celtics play? The Celtics and the Lakers, but they're not playing each other. Who are the 2 games?
Who cares? Who gives a damn? No one.
Well, you brought it up. Also,
the reason I'm bringing it up.
How? No. You.
Okay. The only reason I'm saying the NBA is because your NFL is like the NBA, not the level of play, not the competitiveness, not the desire to win a championship. It's because there's only about 5 teams that can win this thing. There really is.
Sure.
I will put this. It's the Chiefs, the Lions, the Packers. I'm going to throw the Vikings in there and the Ravens. And then Bills look on the outside looking in unless they make a trade. Those are your contenders right now. No one else has got a shot. The games are fun to watch, but that is it. That is your bubble.
All right. You don't think Seattle could get hot?
No, absolutely not.
Interesting.
No way. They are not going to go on the road and win in Green Bay. They're not going to win in Detroit.
They might not have to if they win their division. They're leading their division at this point. Packers are at this point are set up to be a wild card team.
I'll actually counter what you're saying right now. I would rather have the Packers play on the road in Seattle than at home against the 49ers and Lions. I really would.
The funny thing is this Packers team's probably better off to play in a dome.
They're a dome team.
Yeah. Other than Josh Jacobs, right? I feel better about Josh Jacobs in the snow than I would say with Aaron Jones, right? I think Matt LaFleur's wanted to add some physicality to the running game. I think Marshawn Lloyd's probably a part of that too. I think maybe Josh Jacobs instead of Aaron Jones better positions them to play in the cold, but this is a team, they'll go to Ford Field. They'll go to US Bank. They'll have to deal with the crowds. But if I'm going to go on the road anywhere, I'd rather go on the road in the division because that's not intimidating. They already play at Ford Field. They already play at US Bank, right?
Yeah, I mean, these are familiar opponents on the road. Would you feel more nervous playing these teams at home with all the past failures we've had? I know it's a different quarterback. I'm feeling great. If I go on the road, I can air it out. I mean, their quarterback's not any better than ours. I mean, that's the way I look at this. I really think it doesn't matter. You're hitting all the right points. So just play your best ball at the end of the year. Get healthy. I mean, guys like Chris Godwin are getting knocked out for the year. Players are getting knocked out. Who else? Debo is hurt.
The whole Niner, Ayuk just completely blew up his knee.
And really quick on the Niners, before the year, I think we all said we just didn't think they were going to do anything. It's almost like we were fortune tellers. Like we just knew the Niners would just implode and it was injuries. So,
well, I mean, they started the year injured, and this is what's difficult. Tony, I appreciate it. I got to run. It's the same in the NBA. Like it's nice to be a veteran, experienced team. Veterans get hurt more. The Packers are younger. They seem to be a little bit more spry. I want to knock on wood because players get hurt. I'm not saying that they're impervious to injuries, but I'd rather have a younger team than an older team. Traditionally, conventionally, those guys stay a little bit healthier. Speaking of the NBA, we'll talk with Bucks Film Room coming up next. I want to bash the Sixers because Embiid and Paul George aren't playing, and I'm like, it's opening night. What have they been doing? What's the issue? Are they coming off surgery? No. Nick Nurse says today, well, he's progressing. From what? What is he progressing from, Nick? I don't mean to be mad at Nick Nurse. It's a Joel Embiid issue. Bucks Film Room, Brian Sampson is going to join us to shoot the breeze, talk a little basketball to wrap up the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I've been talking about the vibe of our team. We have a hell of a vibe in our locker room, and it's fun to come. Hate to say work, but it is work, right? We get paid to do this, so it's been fun to come to work every day and compete with the guys, man. It's fun.
It's Bobby Portis. This is new, a little Bucks conversation. Opening night, I finally looked up who the Celtics and the Lakers were playing. I didn't know. I still haven't listened to the Bill Simmons over-under. I'm behind. I'm behind on all the NBA things. Boston is hosting the Knicks, which should be fun. And the Lakers hosting the Wolves, which should be fun. Bucks in action tomorrow night. Now, we knew Chris Middleton wouldn't be playing, but we learned today that neither will Paul George or Joel Embiid. They're not playing either, which I think is kind of funny. And we can discuss that further over the course of the show and tomorrow night as well. Joining us now, our friend Bucks Film Room, Brian Sampson, and joining us on the live stream as well. If you're watching the show, how have you been, Brian? It's been too long, Film. How are you?
I've been great, just chilling, waiting for the season to begin. So thanks for having me on, Grant. I appreciate it.
Is there, okay, so coming up tonight, is there anything interested that you're like really excited to watch for between Knicks Celtics, Wolves Lakers? Is there anything like Bron and Bronny Jr.? Does that do anything for you?
No, I mean, I don't even think Bronny will see the court. I mean, maybe they'll sneak him on just to make it like a big historical moment, but I think it's just one game. So I'm actually most looking forward to seeing the overreactions after one game. But on the court, the Knicks are put together to beat the Celtics. That's why they acquired Bridges and made those deals this year. So I'm excited to see this first iteration and whether or not those moves worked for them or will have a chance of working.
Do you like JJ Redick as a coach?
I have to like JJ Redick. I have nothing bad to say after he's name dropped me one time at least on his podcast and things like that. So I cannot say anything bad about JJ Redick.
You can't, I suppose. Okay, well, let's get into the Bucks tomorrow night. So I just think it's funny. The NBA is very much a perception league, right? Like I hate whining about narratives, but I think narratives control a lot of what is said and what is believed about the league. And I just find it interesting. Like Chris Middleton is announced he's not going to play, and the whole league is like, here we go again, right? Keep your eye on Milwaukee. And then we learn that Paul George isn't going to play. And a lot of people think Paul George is going to be the difference maker for Philly. Like I don't know why one player's absence is viewed one way and another player is viewed another. But I think we have a little bit of a difference in PR and perception maybe tomorrow night with a couple absences between Bucks Sixers. Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Bucks, Chris Middleton getting him healthy is key. Like that's just going to be the key for the entire season, right? Is health, and not healthy here in October, but healthy in April, May, and June. But yeah, I mean, I think the Bucks are really their PR team or something just isn't good out there. I mean, they're being hated on with Chris Middleton about like they're a popular pick to be a play-in team. Meanwhile, the 76ers, like Embiid played in the Olympics this year
And
and
look bad.
yeah, and lost all this weight, and now he's not even ready. And then Paul George, and they still seem to be flying high, and they've never made it out of the second round in Embiid's era. And here again today, Giannis gets some more trade rumors or whatever on ESPN First Take. So it's Milwaukee really has a lot of that narrative going against them entering the season, and really there's only one way to change that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I want to carry water for the Bucks online, and I want to push back against some of this crap. But also, like they've lost in the first round for 2 straight years. Like that
Yeah.
comes with the territory, and I'm not going to waste my breath like carrying water for them online. I feel a little bit higher about them than I think a lot of people do. But you lose in the first round back-to-back years. That's what happens. I did you see Nick Nurse's comments today about Joel Embiid? Like, I thought I thought the Sixers media did a pretty good job. Like they asked him pretty directly, like, was there a setback? Or like, how is it that Embiid's not ready? Like this date has been on the calendar for a long time. And Nick Nurse kind of like just didn't give an answer. He's like, he's progressing nicely. But then everyone's like, progressing from what? It's just an odd situation. And it is kind of a kick to the store. I understand opening night is ceremonial as much as is it anything, because the playoffs don't start for another 5-6 months. But it is weird to just have 2 good players who didn't have offseason surgery. Nothing crazy. Well, I don't know about Paul George, but I know Embiid did, and he played in the Olympics. It's just bizarre. And like, if I was a ticket buying Sixers fan, I certainly wouldn't appreciate it.
Yeah, and definitely I think the team has to be worried about it because this has been a issue throughout his entire career. And at least in the past, he's been able to start the season at least in somewhat good health. And so this year, that doesn't even seem to be the case. But it definitely, I know last year he was talking about a lot of personal goals like MVP, playing X amount of games. I think he's graduated past that this year. It sounds like he was saying he doesn't care about any of that, which like about time. Every year he had these great quotes in media day and everything, along with Jimmy Butler and the Heat. And I feel like the Bucks matured past that point a long time ago, where it's not about those individual accolades; it's about that team's success. So it's really just exciting to see what this, and I say first iteration, because what the Bucks are tomorrow night and what these teams are is not who they're going to be at the end of the year. They're going to grow and evolve, hopefully for the better. And so this is just really that starting point for each of these teams.
So let me ask you a Doc Rivers question, the X's and O's, because you are so good at this stuff. When you watch the Bucks down the stretch last year and they had issues, they had shortcomings, major or minor, you probably thought maybe, or we all probably thought here and there, it's like, oh, if only Doc Rivers had been here since the beginning, this would be easier. This would be better. He could have addressed this, or he could have done that. What kind of advantages do you think Doc will have, offense, defense, whatever, to start the season that he really could have used when he got here first, in whenever it was, April or February, or January, February last year, whenever that was?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is they had a week of practice to begin the season. He's really big. They took him out to California. He talks a lot about how that was helpful for that Boston Celtics team that won the championship. We'll see. I think that's really what he's banking on, is that camaraderie and those relationships that they're able to build with one another and be able to use that as a launching pad throughout the entire season. He's talked about being able to put in his own concepts on both sides of the ball. We'll see if that works. I think that, well, in the preseason, we saw 2 things in particular: a 5-out offense. So they were going back to kind of like what Budenholzer did, not exactly the same, but the same premise, where spreading people out on the 3-point line. But then the other just general offensive principle they used was putting Brook Lopez in the dunker spot, which again, pros and cons, that's the entire game. So we'll see on that. Defensively, they really just are going to embrace, like, yep, we know we're slow, we know we're unathletic, we know we're old, but they're just going to own that and really be physical. They're going to make teams go through Brook Lopez and or Giannis in the paint to score inside. And so that'll be really exciting. They're not going to run from who they are. They're really going to embrace that on both ends of the court. And that should play to their advantage on defense, considering the NBA seems intent on allowing the defenders to play physical like they did over the second half of last season. So that should help them being able to negate some of that speed disadvantage they have.
Well, and they're not going to be able to outrun anyone. Like they can try to mitigate their lack of speed against the Sixers, or not the Sixers, but against the Pacers or the Celtics. they're just not going to be able to do that. So if they can lean into their differences, if they can lean into their strengths, that's probably their best bet. Dame didn't get here till like a week before training camp last year. And the conditioning, the strength, the offseason stuff, that was awkward for him as well. What kind of advantages do you think he'll have this year that he lacked last year? How do you think he can grow with this team and with his teammates?
He worked out with David Goggins. Does that count? Did like 2 million push-ups in a 4-day span and was sore for like 2 months after that.
It's a better man than me. Yeah.
I was tired just watching those clips. I mean, he has been, he talked, for a guy who's very humble, he's talked a lot about those difficulties that he went through last year. He looked very sharp in the preseason. So I think that he was really able to go through an entire offseason where he's actually able to work hard and do the workouts that he wanted. And now he's really confident in his ability to put that onto the court in action. And Doc Rivers is kind of, I think he's in a unique spot where he had half a season last year to be able to do that, or to be able to work with this team, knows what he wants from Damian Lillard. So I think that's benefited Lillard as well, as he knows where those spots are in the court that he's going to be operating from. I think the best experience is going to be him and Giannis going to work in actual games. Big, huge story coming out that they didn't actually hook up in the offseason, which I think is overblown. Like, what were they going to do? Just run 2-on-0 in the open gym, or like go against some guys and pick up basketball? Like the preseason and the regular season are where those reps are really going to count. So I think that will be the biggest advantage of knowing where his shots are going to come from the floor, knowing what Doc and what his teammates want going into this season.
And his continuity, right? I think too many things probably changed at once last year. Like put it this way, if I knew that they were going to be able to get Damian Lillard, okay, well, maybe I'd keep Bud. Okay, maybe we don't need to change two things, right? Or if I knew that they were going to run back the same team, okay, well, let's change the coach. The problem is they did both, and then they changed the coach again in the middle of the year. Like, I feel like for as long as the NBA season is, to just give Dame and Giannis a runway for a couple of months in a stable, continuous situation. I mean, they didn't even have that last year because they played for two different coaches. I suppose you could put Joe Prunty in there, but just a stable environment for them to build reps over the course of a couple months. I know it seems like a simple thing, but it's a thing that they didn't have last season.
Yeah, and they also fired more or less their offensive coordinator days before the regular season started, and I think that I was worried about that at the time. That's very difficult to do, especially considering the history that he had with Dame. And so I think that was just another change that, again, just you add it to the pile of things and setbacks that both Lillard and the Bucks had to fight through last year.
Okay, so some of their new offseason additions. We're talking with Brian Sampson, Bucks film room, Gary Trent Jr., Taurean Prince, who probably does he make the start? Probably with Chris out tomorrow night. Yeah. I'm interested to see. So, strong thoughts on any of the new additions or any of the changes personnel wise from last offseason. Take it any way you want. Any of those guys. What do you think?
I love them all. I think they're all great additions, and it's really improvements on the margins. Like they didn't go out and make a huge trade or make a huge signing, but all three of those guys fit perfectly with what the Bucks want to do on both ends. They're physical defenders. They can space the floor somewhat, at least for most of them. So I really love those deals. I think that they are not getting nearly the attention that they should. I mean, those are three guys that you can make a case for should have signed much bigger and longer deals than vet minimum deals Milwaukee got him to. So Horst has not been great at drafting, but like he continues to, I think, hit home runs in free agency. Look back to Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis. Malik Beasley was solid until March. So a lot of these guys really have been good additions, and I think these three will fit perfectly. Trent Jr., he's going to be an upgrade on Beasley on both ends of the court. No one's going to confuse him with an elite defender, but he's better than people, I think, give him credit for as well. And then Taurean Prince, I was really impressed with his ability to stay attached to ball handlers in the preseason. He gets up into their space, uses his active hands to pressure them and force them into mistakes. So I think those are three great additions that we're not giving enough attention to. And in a league where games are won or lost on the margins, those are three guys that I think are going to give them valuable minutes and know their role.
The Gary Trent thing seemed like it like that kind of solidified the whole offseason. It's like, okay, so they got Taurean Prince. That's fine. But they got Gary Trent. I just didn't think that Gary Trent was in the cards for them. I didn't think that was possible. And like his chemistry and his history with Dame as well, that's a nice thing. Hey, to wrap up, I know you tweeted that, you're going to defend the Bucks a little bit and push back against the disrespect maybe that they've gotten relative to some of their competitors. So last year, the East finished Boston, New York, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Orlando, Indy, and then the 76ers. How do you see the East? How would you order these teams?
Yeah, I think at least at the top, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the same with Boston, New York, Milwaukee. I think that's and I think Boston's going to be really hard to beat. I think they're just far and away the best team in the East and the rest of the NBA. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if New York and then Milwaukee. And then I could see really that cluster. A lot of it's going to depend on health of Embiid and Paul George and where Philly fits. And Pacers could make a leap. Heat, I'm sure I'm missing some team. Cavaliers, I think there's just going to be a dogfight there. But I would put the Bucks at second and third, and being there quite comfortably. I don't think that they'll be that close to the play-in.
You have them much higher than most do. I don't know where I stand on it because I think health has so much to do with it, and where we are on January 15th could be so different for March 15th. Like when the contending teams lock in and they really start to stack W's once the season kind of gets rolling, it's difficult to forecast for sure. I could see Indiana or Cleveland taking a big jump. I could see them kind of like, oh, they're not going to take the leap that we thought. The classic Atlanta Hawks thing where it's like, this is the year it's all going to come together. And then it never does. Right. So I'm interested to see in the East, and I don't know. I'll probably watch some games tonight, I guess. I want to be able to tell my kids one day that I watched LeBron and his son play together for the first time. Something I can't miss.
That would be nice. And the thing I'd say about the standings is usually what they are on Christmas Day is what they end up being. Historically, that's like if you just look on Christmas Day, wake up, check the standings, that mostly applies to where they'll be at the end of the year. And Milwaukee has a tough schedule to start the season. So I think these first 2 months we'll get a really good idea.
Well, I look forward to it. We're opening night tomorrow night, minus a couple players, but that should probably benefit the Bucks. They're without their second best player, third best player. I guess Philly's without. I guess I don't know where Maxey fit. There's a bunch of star power missing. Who cares? We're all still going to watch it, and it's just kind of become a matter of fact and a matter of life.
It'll be fun.
It will be. I appreciate your time. Bucks Film Room on Twitter. Read his stuff at Forbes. Brian, I appreciate it. Enjoy the start of the season.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the time, Brian Sampson. Follow his work on Twitter at Bucks Film Room. It's very easy. I always like giving him guff on Twitter and just referring to him as film, which is a stupid bit that makes me laugh, and that probably means that I should get a life to some degree. Let's take a 3-minute break. We'll come back, wrap up the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Last couple minutes of the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Appreciate Buck's Film Room. Our friend Brian Sampson back in lacrosse. I forgot to ask him how his game's going. I know he loves getting in a run at the YMCA. I missed that Y in lacrosse. I know he's getting his shots up. Scrappy defensive player, can hit some threes. Real good fundamentals. And I don't say those words. I don't use those words to diminish his skill. I don't think Brian's very big. I've met him once. He's not getting up in the post. All right. He's doing the dirty work. And he's told me that before. I'm not underselling his game. Those are his words, not mine. The NBA opening night tonight. Celtics, Knicks. I mean, I'm interested to see what the Knicks look like. And I'm interested to see what the Wolves look like tonight. I almost forgot. They traded Cat for Julius Randle for some reason. Still not really sure why they did that. But I guess I'm interested to watch. And of course, I'll be able to tell my kids, hey, I remember exactly where I was when I first watched LeBron and Bronny Jr. play together. It was powerful. Took my breath away. They're getting in the game tonight early together. They're sharing the court early. I know Brian was poo-pooing that. Like, I don't even think he's going to play. He's going to play. He's going to be playing. And we'll all be worse off for it, but whatever. I need JJ Redick to fill as a coach. I need it the worst way. Doing his press conferences, pushing back against that's your narrative. Oh, it's my least favorite word in the world. Enjoy NBA opening night. Seems like all the starters are going to play tonight. Wish we could say the same for tomorrow night, but whatever. It's only October, so it's not the end of the world. Be back tomorrow. Talk more Packers. Continue to get ready for the Jags. They should blast the Jags this weekend, so I want to continue to talk about that tomorrow. Enjoy the night. Enjoy the basketball. Thanks for listening. Podcast will go up in just a little bit. Talk to you tomorrow at 4.